bit older video today, one that I've kind of had on the back burner for a little while. And if you're looking for the affix, check the description for a timestamp. That will send you right to it. It's not an amulet that I kept for the entire run, but I did have it for quite a while, and I did try to use it to its fullest extent. But in the first part of this video, it's just all cluster bomb all the time. This video is actually recorded very near to the time that I made the Tactics 3-cell bow and grenade run, where the cluster bomb also played a pretty huge part in that video, so I felt like it might be a little redundant, and cluster bomb is a cool weapon, but it's not that cool, I think, to support two videos like that. I did a pretty similar sort of thing with the symmetrical lance recently, and I thought that there was enough going on with that, and that's a cool enough weapon to justify it. This one, cluster bomb, pretty simple. You throw out a bomb, splits into 6 bombs, does a lot of damage, any sort of synergy, you tend to get a lot of good work out of synergies and all that sort of stuff. Only real downside is particularly bad cooldown time, which at this point in the game was pretty easily fixed by getting the mutation to lower cooldown, but now that it's no longer a tactics weapon in the current build of the game, the castle update, it's not nearly as easy to get enormous amounts of burst damage like you were able to do in, say, this video. And even then, there is still a little bit of waiting around just to make sure that you can use it. The route that I go in this video is through the sewers, because this is maybe one of the better items that you could possibly use for the sewers. With the amount of bats, with the amount of host zombies that are exploding constantly into corpse worms, it's useful to have something that has a really huge amount of range that it can hit. I mean, even if you don't manage to get all 6 bombs onto a single enemy, it will even take down elites if you do that. Having it spread along the ground in such a huge area is very useful for taking out, you know, huge groups of smaller enemies that have less health. And like I said, if you're able to get some synergies with this sort of thing, if you're able to get like plus 100% on burning target or poison target, just getting some sort of primary weapon that does that will carry you through an entire run. It's a similar, I would say it's a more versatile version. Well, at least this version that exists right now is a more versatile version of the Knife Storm, where you're able to get huge amounts of burst damage, but this one can be paired with a lot of different types of weapons, because it's pure damage with some modifiers on it, while the Knife Storm only does bleed damage. A huge amount of bleed damage, certainly. But this one you can throw pretty far away and still get the maximum effect out of it despite that. Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to do a little bit of a blast from the past, a little bit of cold storage sort of stuff today is because, well, I'm a little busy on other stuff, but also because now that the beta is out for the castle update, I can finally get 100% of everything unlocked and, you know, keep it this time. Yeah, you might not realize it, but for every single one of those alpha updates, I unlocked everything manually. There was no cheating, no cheat engine or whatever going on there. And now that I can finally keep it permanently, that's going to be real nice. But it is going to take a little bit of time before I get back to that. But hey, now that it's finally out, and now that I'm going to say, well, soon enough it's going to be in the final version, beta always precedes that. I'm really happy to see that we're finally getting some of those changes in here, and I think that the cluster bomb shows some of the best ideas that they had for the castle update. Finally coming out into the mainstream. Namely that cluster bomb, for example, was changed into a brutality weapon, as opposed to the tactics weapon that it was here. One of the major issues that I think that the brutality update and later the Foundry update brought in was the fact that every single skill was tactics scaling. And that meant that if you wanted to, that one of the most versatile sort of builds that you could create was to just put everything into tactics and leave it like that, because that means that every single skill that you picked up could all work with that. And then when the Foundry update came out, every single skill you picked up would also give you more tactics. Oh, that would be a nice one, Dick. But what happens then, well, what happened then is that if you want to go with the tactics build, you would end the first level, or the first biome, the prisoner's cells, with, like, sometimes 7 or even, like, 9 tactics? If you manage to get a full suite of tactic scaling main hands as well as some skills. Whereas if you were doing something like Brutality, you would have a kind of split between tactics and Brutality then, even if you were trying to pick up as many things that scaled with Brutality as possible. Now that grenades have been kind of put into the Brutality, more melee, burst damage build, it makes it so that things are a lot more versatile compared to what they were right now. Additionally, the way that they changed up how health works, definitely. The fact that you can't get just a pure tactics build and have the same amount of health as going on a pure survival build, I think helps a lot. Health has always been kind of a weird thing in the game in that way, where you want to say that survival should be the tankiest, but you also don't want to say that, you know, you don't get any health from your off stats, because otherwise what you do is you just turn into, you know, all strength all the time like it was way back in the day, prior to the Brutal update. And then, you know, hey, take health when you can. So pretty much, I'm just going to say that I'm really, thus far, liking the changes to... That was pretty good. I'm thus far liking the changes that the current changes that they have to the balance in the game, and I think it's a lot better than it's been in the past. Especially right now, where just taking pure tactics and going with some cluster bombs would get you through 2-cell difficulty pretty trivially. I mean, you saw how that elite just melted there. It wasn't even a... I mean, that wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. And I think that for a lot of the more powerful skill weapons, that was true. And now that this is no longer a tactic scaling weapon, you're not able to get that insane amount of burst damage unless you're really building into Brutality, and then you can't use it nearly as often. It's a good change in my eyes overall, and I think that looking at this run can, you know, really show you that. Oh yeah, this was during the time when I thought that Tranquility still stacked with things that weren't your main hand weapons. That's anything... I mean, at this point, I am well aware that anything that you get that is... Any mutation that you get that is plus damage is only to your main hand. So your swords, your bows, whatever. Not to tactics, not to grenades, not to, turrets, not to... incidental sort of weaponry, you know, like a damage over time effects, like a blood sword you would get the damage bonus on, but you wouldn't get the damage bonus on the bleed damage that the blood sword did. So, I mean, at this time, I still thought that Tranquility was maybe one of the most versatile mutations in the game, because I thought it could be used with, you know, turrets, it could be used with grenades, it could be used with ranged weaponry, when in reality, no, it could just be used with ranged weaponry, and that's it. Yeah, I mean, as if this wasn't powerful enough already, I just got some pretty decent upgrades there. I think I got some good synergies related to poison damage, which in the old sewers is especially effective because there are a ton of enemies down here that split into other enemies, and just the bats, well, the host zombies, I mean, that's really what I'm talking about. And of course the kamikaze bats cannot, like, you cannot take a hit from cluster bombs at all, though I definitely can. Ah, well, you gotta be careful. And although that was a great first hit, just a sliver of health left. I could have easily just, you know, did a dive attack on that guy, but that's not really the point. So here we are, probably the more important bit of the run. Super Mario mode. I'm sure that if Nintendo knew about it being in this game, which I'm fairly certain that most people don't because it's so rare, that they would probably be kind of litigious about it. But hey, I won't tell anybody if you won't. Super Mario mode. You jump on an enemy's head, and you're able to stun it. It also does a very slight bit of damage. I would like it if I would like it a lot. I would honestly probably, if there was one weapon that I would cheat in stuff for, it would probably be a Super Mario mode weapon, or a Super Mario mode like showcase run. But as far as I know, there's probably the first example of me using it. As far as I know, it does not actually scale with anything. But yeah, it's very simple. All you do is you jump on top. You get anywhere near the top of an enemy, and it will do a slight bit of damage, stun them. The stun is pretty nice, but the thing is, you also lose your ability to kind of fall through the enemy at the same time. So if you're in a particularly large cloud of enemies, or if you're trying to drop down in between a group of enemies, it just is a huge hassle and is awful. It's just awful to use. Of course, I wanted to take this because, hey, you know, it's unusual. But yeah, you can see right there. Try to get behind that shield bearer, and just it wasn't working. It's an unusual weapon, certainly, and hey, I got the stats anyway out of that amulet, but yep, and here's where I decide, you know what? Showcase. Yeah, when I say nominal damage, it does nominal damage. It is. And that stun is not very long either. I mean, it's weird. It's weird. It's unique. I'll say that. But oh god, especially a little bit later in the run. Yeah, did you see how I was bouncing on top of the heads of those bats there? That's gonna be a theme. And later in the run, it just gets worse. Let's go with that. Certainly something that also... I'm also killing enemies fast enough that I don't really need a stun on them. It's not that big of a deal, so... Hey, I'm not supposed to be doing dive attacks. It's not the run here. I can't remember exactly, but this may have also been the time when I was just kind of getting sick of using the weapon using the amulet, even accidentally as well. Amulet affixes like these have actually become a lot more common in some of the more recent updates because of the amount of amulets that you can get. There's a lot more elites in the game, especially on higher cell difficulties. Well, like one of the affixes that I got, some of the more powerful affixes. Also, I don't think that works with the cluster bomb. One of the more powerful affixes I got was the one that causes you to go invisible after 5 seconds of not attacking, which pretty much trivializes going through just about any part of the entire game. You know, minus bosses. And that I didn't only get once, I got 2 videos in a row. And something that you didn't see on screen, but something that happened was that I actually got it 3 videos in a row. I just opted not to take it because, hey, getting it the first 2 times is kind of fun, and getting the 3rd time would be like, okay, it's old, we know how it works, you know? That's some good stuff. You can see how incredibly useful it was there. Super Mario mode, I still have not seen after this, even in the original game where there were amulet shops, or the original game, the original older updates where there were actual amulet shops. It was a pretty rare sight to see. Of course, with the amount I played the game, I have had a Super Mario mode more than a few times in the past. This is probably the longest I've used it. But I have not seen it since this time either, and of course I do kill a lot of elites as I'm going through the higher cell difficulty, you know, trying to get used to that, trying to make it so that I can get 4 cell difficulty, you know, as trivial as possible. So, I don't know, it would be one that I would definitely pick up for novelty's sake, so I would say in the future, but come on, just look at that. And besides, you saw me trying to get on top of some of the tentacles there, it just doesn't work for some enemies. Maybe it's because, technically, the tentacles don't have a head? I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Either way, I really don't need that amulet to do much of anything anyway. The stun is too minimal, and bouncing on top of enemies does virtually no damage. The cluster bombs are... I mean, you know, this is why I was thinking that. It's like, hey, do I really need to put up a cluster bomb video? Because it's so simple, and it's one of those weapons that is just good all around. It's like, it's so good and it's so easy to use and just such an excellent weapon that there's not much to really say about it. It's just good. Graveyard. Another area with enemies that spawn into, as Angband would say, breed explosively into other enemies with the Host Zombies 2.0 here. So that's going to result in, well, some stuff. I'm sure you can probably already guess what it is. But aside from that, I think this is also the during the time when the graveyard was much, much longer and much, much more irritating to go through. Having the change to make it a bit shorter and a bit more reasonable in length makes a lot of sense to me. When this was the final area of the game and there were, you know, less areas to go through, it made sense to make this a huge, long, you know, the final, I want to say countdown? That's some good jumping. But no, the final stretch, I guess. But now that it's, you know, just something that you hit in kind of mid-game, I'm very, very much okay with it being a shorter, more palatable experience. Similar sort of thing happened with the Sepulchre. Because it used to be that the Sepulchre was, what, the third area you went to? You start in the prisoner cells, ossuary, Sepulchre, and then graveyard, and you're done. You didn't even have to fight a boss during the Darkness update. It was a great shortcut. But that was also when, you know, you could easily justify it being... Amazing damage, by the way. It was also when you could easily justify it being much, much longer because, you know, you're skipping so much of the game. Yeah, you can see the corpse spiders flying out of the host zombies here. They are a thing. Also, I think just climbing down that rope, thanks to the Super Mario mode, made it so that I killed those kamikaze bats. It's goofy, and if you and although it is kind of fun to, you know, do a quick Goomba stomp on some of those bats there, if you accidentally say, yeah, no, that's super effective. Blow up a host zombie and then you have the misfortune of being above them with this particular necklace, you will kind of start to shoot up into the sky because you're just bouncing higher and higher. It's a very, you know, old video game, like, tactic, you know, when you can bounce on top of enemies, like, oh yeah, you know, you just spin jump on the boo's head, and then as the boo chases you upwards, you're able to fly indefinitely, in a Super Mario World type way. I mean, of course, that's not how they work, because I'm pretty sure boos are still in the shy, non-moving form if you're doing a spin jump in Super Mario World, but that's not the game I'm playing. What am I even talking about? Stun is a little less intense against, or is a little more intense against non-boss enemies, and that's, I mean, I'm trying to use it, but it's not really one to use. Good old-fashioned challenges. I don't know, maybe, you know, looking at this right now, maybe there was something to kind of rolling on top of enemies and using them as like a lily pad bouncing sort of experiment. It's hard to say. I would probably try it out, but like I said, it's such a rare amulet affix that I don't think I could possibly get another one. Also, the something that's kind of hard to see in the video, but I can definitely assure you is a thing, is that the hitbox for actually jumping on an enemy's head is surprisingly Tiny? Wow. Surprisingly tiny, but also at the same time generous. It's very easy to jump on enemies' heads, but it's very hard to continue to jump on enemies' heads. And I mean, whether that makes it good or bad, pretty much you don't do the Mario thing where you can jump directly up in the air. After you jump on top of an enemy's head, you kind of get forced off to the left or right. And that can make it a bit difficult to continue doing damage. Another reason why, unless this was doing some pretty intense scaling, something like a dive attack did. I know in older versions of the game, so amulet affixes would definitely scale with your stats. I would get, I think in the original dive attack run, I managed to get a drop a bomb when you roll affix. Yeah, that's right. And I declared it being a cheater necklace because it was doing way more damage, by the time I got to the graveyard, because it was doing way more damage than I thought it was going to be doing. Like on the order of, it says it's doing 84 damage, it's actually doing 1,000 damage. And I'm like, well, I want it to be as pure as possible, you know, for the dive attack run. I don't know why. I'm honorable when it comes to these games. So I had to pitch that one out there. And this one is more of a novelty, certainly, than any sort of cheating. And besides, it's the cluster bomb run, which it's like, on the level of challenge runs, one of the least challenging, let's say that. So, you don't really feel, I don't feel too bad about maybe not fitting perfectly into the criteria I set out for myself. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so honorable when it comes to this game. I mean, it's not like I don't know how to cheat in this game or anything. I just, for some reason, I think that even if I'm doing something off-screen where nobody could possibly see it, it's just like, well, it doesn't feel the same if I don't do it right. I mean, you think that with the amount of time that I put into these sort of games that, hey, I wouldn't... Hell, I've even said before, if you don't play the game plays you, but that does not extend to cheating for me. I mean, even if I'm the one that's setting out whatever, it's all stupid. Taking a surprising amount of damage in this run. I mean, that has nothing to do with anything. I'm just kind of surprised that I am through, is that 2 charges of the health flask and nearly halfway down, and like, what is that? I can play with it. Whatever. There's still, if there was any, I think at this point in the game with the Foundry update, doing all the work and everything, that you can, doing 2-cell mode, or doing 3-cell mode would be something way more possible with some of the weaponry you got, and with the way that it's been balanced so that you now have a lot more weapons are at a higher level compared to, your normal mode, less than 3-cell essentially. It's a lot more possible to do only singular weapon runs on 3-cell mode. However, it's also just harder in general because I think the game is better balanced. So it was nice doing this one for a while, but if there was one that I was going to say I could have probably done on 3-cell mode, it would be the cluster bomb. This weapon is just amazing. I mean, I know I've been harping on that the entire video, but it's great. It's a great weapon. If you're looking for, like, hey, what's the best, I guess, brutality skill that you can take now, if you're not looking for something to supplement your damage, like a phaser, or something to give you a little bit of extra protection, like a, let's say a frost grenade, I would say that pure damage is, you can't do much better than a cluster bomb. It's got the damage, it's got the area of effect, it's just overall good. The only issue is that it does have kind of a long cooldown, and that's But you would expect that with just about any weapon you use that's not like a phaser or a one-time use thing, your vampirisms or whatever. Try not to force cell door just for, you know, novelty's sake? Whatever, it's... we all know what that turned out to be, and what that is probably... hell, it got changed, which says to me, still totally unfinished, even though it is possible to, you know, go in there. Ah, well. Yeah, the Castlevania-esque diet. Diet power rankings. Number 1, fruit. Number 2, Castlevania-esque, very, very nearly trailing fruit. Fruit remains the best. Come on, you're playing it like Pac-Man. You get to eat cherries. My avatar is a cherry blossom. I know that's not the same sort of tree, but I feel like I gotta rep it anyway. Castlevania-esque is just great. Good nod to inspirations of the series. Overall, like it. Mid-tier, let's say Carnivore. Not because Carnivore, you know, does anything particularly well, but I do like the idea of eating chicken leg. And low-tier everything else, because who cares? I mean, carrots are cool, but come on. And carrots were some of the OG stuff, but that's not enough to carry them in the power rankings, as far as I'm concerned. Stupid. Yeah, no castle in this update, so it's pretty much the Sepulchre, and then just, oh, the assassin's not even gonna know what hit her. I mean, there was the tactics run about the same time, and although that one was, God, I want to say almost like 2-3 shot, this one does not have nearly that. Well, I mean, I'm missing 2 slots worth of items. And I have 2 useless mutations on. So it's not going to be quite the same, but it's... I think I said, like... I mean, you remember that, you remember the Elite earlier in the video that I said, hey, that wasn't a fight, that was a massacre? Well, let's just go with that. Aside from that, Sepulchre has pretty good amount of enemies, no real... aside from the, you know, kamikaze bats, which are not nearly as prevalent as they are in, say, the old sewers, you mostly have earthbound enemies, things that are very susceptible to what the cluster grenade is throwing down. Though honestly, you'd be hard-pressed to find any enemy that doesn't take... that is strong against the cluster grenade, because even flying enemies are going to have a hard time getting out of the range of that thing. It's so enormous. Trackers, though, are not... I mean, there's tons of them in here, but they are not the tankiest enemies, and they go down... Not even... You don't even need to hit them with, like, all 6 bombs. Just a couple of them will do it. And certainly that is part of me stacking everything into tactics. I mean, if I wasn't doing that. But, hey, one of the more damaging... a lot of the skills you take, they're not so much for damage, they're for support stuff. Cluster grenade, not so much. That's just, it's for your pure damage. Aside from that, from what I remember, this was a pretty quick Sepulchre, all in all. Not that that's kind of always how the Sepulchre goes, where sometimes you get, especially when it was much larger like this, sometimes you're able to find the routes immediately. Sometimes you need to stare at the map and try to figure out, hey, which is the corner that I haven't gone to yet? Which I would probably say happens to me way more than lucking into both the keys immediately, but hey, that's how it goes. No real use in going in any of these cell doors. I believe they're all, at least until the castle update came out, at this point they were all cursed chests, and I wasn't really building for cursed chests, and I certainly could have, but I think brevity is the soul of YouTube videos, so I opted for that instead. At least that's what I keep trying to do. I said that the tornado run was going to be a quick one, but then when I saw that it turned out to be, yeah, especially after the original one was over an hour long, and then I look at the video, you know, you compile all the footage and then you see the video time is 50 minutes, and I think I may have audibly said to myself, ah, damn it. The dangers of doing live recording, everybody. At least this one, I was during the. I mean, certainly if I'm taking more melee weapons, I think I could probably get it down to a half-hour time. The 50-minute runtime was more of a testament to the fact that Tornado's not really meant to do damage. I mean, if it was like the cluster grenade here, I probably could have swept the floor with, you know, any enemy in the same way I'm doing here, but just not. That wasn't really in the cards at that time. Let's just go with that. That said, still a fun weapon, and still one that I really like. Overall, I think that maybe the Tornado is cool, but it might actually be the weakest one of the newest update for me, because so many of the other ones are so neat. I mean, the symmetrical lance just alone is amazing. I'm still waiting on the giant killer, but eventually. I mean, everything I used with it, which the fact that I've been able to use it at all is kind of a miracle, says to me, you know, I think I can wait. I know what it is, you know? Should be finishing up in here pretty soon. Because I think this is the end right here. It's always a grab bag if you're going to have one final area, or if it's going to go directly to the mini-boss. Of course, the mini-boss isn't even in the game well, isn't a forced part of the game anymore. So, you know, that's kind of how it goes. And here's where I said, you know what? Nah, enough with Mario mode, and decided to call it there on that one. Too bad. Could have been something fun against the assassin, but somehow I also have the feeling that she may be a little difficult to hit with that particular necklace anyway. Hey, maybe sometime in the future. Maybe sometime in the future I can figure out how it works against the current final boss. One that I want to, if you're watching this one because you saw, hey, oh, it's just the Foundry update, it's not the new one yet, I won't spoil. I mean, I've been purposely keeping that dude out of the thumbnails for a reason. I mean, not that there's any sort of science that goes behind choosing the thumbnails. I just kind of say, like, this looks like kind of a cool thing. Roughly 5 minutes after I upload the video. What do you got, Assassin? Not much. Hey, single weapon builds can take her down super fast, but you know, in the current update, or the soon to be current update, taking her down fast ain't the end of the game anymore. But hey, it was good while it lasted, I'll say that.